Welcome to the Achieve Results Now podcast, the podcast that gives you immediate actions you can take to start seeing life-shifting results now.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Achieve Results Now podcast. This is Mark Cardone.
And Theron Feidt.
So today we're talking a little bit more about goals, but we're talking about a specific reason why people don't achieve their goals and 3 actionable steps that you can put into place to start making progress. And it all starts with a question that I like to talk about is sometimes when we don't meet our goals, and we all have goals we don't meet, but a lot of times we look at it almost like a character flaw, like, well, I just can't do this. Like, it's just not
Yeah.
me,
Yep.
as opposed to, a system or a hang up in the process of
Yeah.
achieving the goal. So it's not necessarily us, even though we are responsible for our goals.
Sure.
It's not a character flaw. It's just something's wrong with our systems.
Well, I think that's a great point because it's dangerous to do that because then you're going to get stuck in a certain mode, and I think it's easier. Oftentimes, as kids, we're programmed by who we're around, our parents and other people and things like that, and for good or bad. And sometimes it's good programming, sometimes it's not so good. But then as we move into adulthood, it's important that we're taking control of this,
Yeah.
and we're really I think being healthy, skeptical in everything is good. You don't want to
Yeah.
be too skeptical and go too much in a rabbit hole, and then you can't trust anybody. But you don't want to trust everybody in authority either, because as we know in the past, we've been down different roads, with
Yeah.
people of authority telling us the wrong things. And so it's important that you're thinking for yourself and you're analyzing different things. And what you said is super important because you can make yourself into, well, I'm just that way.
Yeah.
And once you start saying that in certain things, you're telling yourself that you're not going to grow. You're telling yourself you're not going to improve. You're not going to get better. And that's just now you're starting to die. Not maybe not physically, but mentally, because you're so stuck in your ways and you're so convinced, well, my mother was like this, my father was like this, my family's like this, my culture's like this, and that's just it doesn't it is a thing, but it doesn't have to be a thing.
Yeah. And,
I know that we're getting a little deep into it, but I think it's important that we're understanding that what we're talking about has consequences,
yeah.
negatively and positively.
And I think it's interesting because when you think about anything you use on a daily basis, we've all run into that thing where it's like, a printer, a computer, a
Yeah.
phone, where we go, this stupid thing just doesn't work the way I want it to.
Yeah.
Right. And there's frustration in that, but from that frustration, comes people who are definitely smarter than me, who look at it and go, okay, this is a problem
Yeah.
with this thing, right?
Yeah.
And we need to work to fix the problem,
Hmm.
right? I've never met someone who builds printers, which never work when you need them to, but
Yeah.
always
Yeah.
when it's not a big deal. But I've never met someone who like builds printers, and if I did, I bet they wouldn't say, "This printer doesn't work. I'm trash," right?
Yeah.
Like they probably say, "Okay, look, we need to sit down, look at why it doesn't work, and fix it." You
Right.
know, and I think we need to approach our life that way, where we're going, hey, you know what? I failed a couple times at my fitness goals. It's not because I'm, a lazy person. It's not because I'm a junk person. It's just
Right.
because there's something inherent in the system I'm trying to put together that has a
Right.
problem. So
Right.
today we're talking about the problem solver's playbook and
Yes.
how to really use that problem solving skill that we're going to talk about to help you achieve your goals and the results you want now.
Yep. Now, and the first step is I think it's not going to come as a surprise, but identifying the real problem. Now, the second half of this is identifying the real problem, but not the symptom, because
Right.
oftentimes it's just like if you're sick, if you are just trying to fix the symptoms of your sickness and not getting to the root cause of why you're sick, you're going to have that problem come up time and time again, right? And,
Yeah.
and the same thing with your problems is they're going to keep arising. They're going to keep coming up. They're going to keep showing up in your life because you haven't fixed the root problem. If you have money problems, sometimes you just need to make more money, and that can solve a lot of things. But if you always spend 10% more than you make, then that's never going to be fixed. And some
Right.
people do that. And some people probably spend more than 10% of what they make. But as your income rises, do you remember what that's called? There's a
Uh,
particular principle. But
I do
anyways,
not, but I know there is
yeah,
one.
yep. As your income rises, so do your expenses, and
Uh-huh.
they're always ahead of that, so it's important that you're thinking of, again, not the symptoms of what's wrong, but what is the root problems.
Yeah, and I think that's really important because it's easy for us to look at the goals that we set and the obstacles we run into and say, oh well, it's because of my kids, it's because of my spouse, it's because of
Right. Yep.
whatever. And it's easy to put that blame level on things, but really we need to dig into the specific cause.
Right.
Why did I miss this workout? Was it a motivation issue? Was it a couldn't find my sneakers issue?
Right.
We're going to see those repeatable things. So really performing that audit, and looking at beyond those surface level symptoms and getting into the specific causes.
Right. Yep. And I think, digging a little deeper in there, just like you mentioned, is what is the root? So you
Yeah.
mentioned a couple things, but is it a time reason? Is it your energy? Is it your environment? So what is the reason why things are happening?
Yeah.
Are you setting yourself up for success? One of the things that I like to do is, before I leave for the night, is make sure my desk is neat. It's not a lot of things going on. There might be a couple piles here and there, but there's not a lot of. It's not a mess. So that way, when I get back in the morning, it's a fresh start. I'm not like, oh, I got to clean my desk before I start working. Yeah, that all of those little things can make a big difference for
Yeah.
sure.
100%. And then, getting into so once the obstacle is identified and you've written it down and you really know what the problem is, like where is the glitch in the system?
Right.
Once you know that, step two is really about removing judgment, from the
Hmm.
mist, taking
Right.
away limiting labels, stop using words like lazy, disciplined, failure, all those things that we pointed ourselves, for why things aren't working. I think
Hmm.
that's really important.
Right. And I think it's important that you're treating the miss that you had, the mistake, whatever you want to call it, as data, as feedback, right?
Yeah.
Uh, whoever said this, there's no such thing as failure, only feedback. I
Yep.
mean, that's really what that concept is all about. And successful people and winners in life, you're going to fail. You're going to make mistakes. That's how you get better. If you're not making any mistakes, I would argue that you're not growing. You're not improving. You're not putting yourself on the line. You're not growing to the next level if you're not making mistakes, because that's what it's all about. Because that's feedback.
Yeah.
That's how you get better. So trying to be perfect and trying to have the perfect scenario and everything set up perfectly before you get started, um, is, I think, a common thing with people that like things a certain way. But then the problem is then you don't take any action, or you
Yeah.
take a little bit of action that's not going to really move the needle.
Yeah, I think that's big, and I think fear plays into that too. And I think something that when we talk about judgment, a lot of times we talk about ourselves, but I feel like it's important to look at the judgment we put on the obstacles themselves and on the
Right.
problems.
Hmm.
We look, and you experience this all the time with dojo, but we look at obstacles and we assign in our head a level of difficulty to that
Yeah.
to that obstacle. And it's interesting because even though we know like there's other people who have probably overcome the obstacle,
Hmm.
and we have ways that they've done it, and we have there any problem you have, if you're listening to this right now,
Yeah.
any problem you have has more than likely been experienced and overcome. Like
Yeah.
I'm hard pressed to say, oh my God, I've never heard that problem before.
Right. Right.
So really, even if it's a very complex problem that you have in your system, you can make it infinitely easier by just number one, don't assign that value that it's hard. But
Right.
number two, like look into how other people did it. Like we'll get to that in
Hmm.
the next part. But
Right.
I
Yep.
think not assigning, that level of difficulty and saying to yourself, oh, this is too hard for me,
Right.
is
Yep.
important.
Yep. And then step three is, this is an important one, because I often see this, is it's adjusting the system, not the goal.
Yeah.
Okay. Now that doesn't mean you don't adjust the time frame of the goal. So you might need to push your goal out a little further than originally you had as a date for achievement,
Yeah.
but you don't change the goal. Black belt, as we talk about this, us being dojo rats, the two of us, is we've seen a lot of people give up on their goal, and sometimes really close to their black belt. And instead of giving up on the goal, it's more of what do I need to adjust in working towards that. So I keep the goal, but I have to improve my systems within there.
100%. Yeah, I think that's absolutely right because people look at it and they go, "This is just too hard,"
Right.
and it's anything that's worthwhile has difficulty associated to it,
Hmm.
right?
Yep.
But I think between that, trying to really find those micro versions,
Right.
of the goal. When you're struggling with a habit, I can't talk today. When you're struggling with a habit, really, pivoting to smaller starting versions.
Right.
And I think martial arts is great for that because we really do. There's that, kind of start small, work your way up approach. But I
Right.
think that's a big part of problem solving is looking at,
Hmm.
that small version of the same goal.
Right. And along the same lines of that small thing is use that to create momentum. So that's why you want to do it. So if the next step you have to take or the change that you have to take is large, is break that down into smaller steps. That's going to get momentum. It maybe even build your confidence or your belief in yourself, whatever it is. And that small step builds to the next step to builds to the next step. And that's how you create the momentum or recreate the momentum that you lost in the
Yeah.
past. And by breaking that down.
And this is so interesting because I think momentum, I mean, success in anything is really just, the continual solving of a series of problems,
Right.
and I think about this in business, like as you grow a business, it's literally goes from how do I get a customer? Here's a problem. Let's solve
Right.
that.
Right.
Now how do I get a second customer? Now how do I manage all of these customers? And it's a constant hitting of a wall
Hmm.
and then saying, I need to figure out and problem solve how to do this.
Right.
You know what I mean? And it's never a straight line. It's always that consistent solving of problems. And as you solve those small problems along the way, not only do you grow, but you build confidence that you're a better problem solver.
Right.
And I
Right.
think that's really where that momentum comes in. Which is why I think this mentality is like so important because we face
Yep.
it in I mean, I face it in parenting, business,
Yep.
fitness, the dojo, everywhere,
Yep. Yep.
sparring.
Yep.
Like, how do I not get punched in the face? So,
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that this whole part is giving yourself some grace. There's a balance of you're pushing yourself, your standards are high, you want to improve yourself, and you might be disappointed that you didn't do something or something didn't happen. And that all of that's okay
yeah,
as long as your disappointment doesn't turn into depression or your disappointment doesn't turn into procrastination. If I always like the phrase, and I heard this many, many decades ago, inspirational dissatisfaction. I
yep,
just think that sums up the attitude that you should have is that you're not happy with the results that you have, but you're not unhappy with yourself.
yeah.
And those lack of results motivates you to move and get better. I just think that's a good balance of attitude.
I love that. And I think that's really a large reason of why, like I mean, you and I both, but definitely why I put a lot of time in this is to talk to people about, like, if you're on this road, you're going to feel dissatisfied. You're going to feel
Yeah.
frustrated. You're going to feel like you're not moving forward at times. Like everybody listening to this podcast has had those feelings. And it's okay. We all have those feelings. It's about
Right.
what you put into place to move on to that next thing. So
Right.
I love that. So anyway, so
Yeah.
let's review Problem Solvers
Yeah.
Playbook. So this is all about looking at your goals, looking at why you're not moving forward as a small problem that can be fixed. So
Hmm.
number one is obviously identify what the real problem is, not the symptom. So really looking at that audit of,
Hmm.
beyond the surface level system, like I missed my workout and dig into the specifics of why you slipped.
Step two is remove judgment from the miss. So strip away the labels that you have, the negative labels. Treat the miss as data, so feedback from it, and adopt a power preframe or a power reframe, I should say. So you reframe in your mind what that data means and how you can use it.
Yeah, and then number three, adjust the system and not the goal. So really tune the inputs, right? Keep your destination the same, but the how, like switching your training routine, things like that. Feel free to change up how you're getting there. Look at those micro versions of the goal, and then ask those momentum questions after every slip. What's one small adjustment I can make next time? To really make this easier, to make this more fluent, to get through this wall. And I think that's a big step in helping you overcome those things that are holding you back in your goals. So that wraps up this episode of the Achieve Results Now podcast. Definitely follow, share with somebody who would like it, and we'll see you on the next show.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for listening. Hop over to our website at www.achieveresultsnow.com to get your free copy of our book, Ignite Results, 4 specific daily actions to help you achieve results now. You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/Achieve Results Now. Thanks for listening, commenting, and subscribing. Now get out there and achieve results now.